In Michael Connelly's novel, The Black Ice, Detective Harry Bosch finally tracks down his father right before his father dies on his deathbed. Harry's father had abandoned his mother, a woman who was forced to live on the streets, and she did tricks to raise Harry. But Harry refused to let that define him. He said, I will forgive every moment that I was stolen from, every moment that was stolen from me, because I refuse to allow the pain to ruin the rest of my life. That loss is not going to define my future. And I can relate to this because there are just times when I kind of like nursing my resentments. Somebody wrongs me, and at the end of the day, I'll replay it, and it go over to my mind. It's like, yeah, that is justified. I have every reason. I feel good, righteous indignation holding on to that wrong. So we understand Peter. When Peter goes to Jesus and says, if my sister or my brother sins against me, how many times do I have to forgive them? I mean, honestly, there has to be a limit. And Jesus turns this on its head when Peter asks, must I forgive even 7 times? Jesus said, not 7, but 77 times. This is a math that doesn't add up. The math of mercy doesn't add up in our own minds. So Jesus tells this parable. A king has a servant who owes him an obscene amount of money. An obscene amount of money. And the king goes to the servant and says, pay me what you owe me. And the servant knows there is no chance he can pay off this debt. And he falls on his knees and he said, Lord, I can't pay this back. Please, 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 can you just forgive this debt? And the king has mercy on the man and he says, your debt is wiped out. It's forgiven. Then the servant thinks, debt. He's got someone that he's above, and he goes to that person, and they owe him a pittance. It's a small amount. And he grabs him by the throat, and he chokes him, and he says, pay me what you owe me. And the man says, I can't pay you. And so he throws him in debtor's prison. And the king hears this story, and he's incensed, and he says, I forgave you this massive debt, and you can't let go of this tiny one? You can't let go? That doesn't work in God's economy. And it's something that we run up against because it is just hard. Grace doesn't work in the way that we think it should. God gives us this massive amount of grace and forgives us this debt. But then when we look at our life and we look at all of the people that owe us, we're like, we become much more calculating. Forgiveness becomes a lot harder, and we hold on to it. And Paul says, you got to forgive people. Don't pass judgment on your neighbor. Don't pass judgment. And it's not, Paul and Jesus are not advocating for cheap grace. They're not saying, hey, you just got to let bygones be bygones. What they're saying is don't let it hold you. Don't let it hold you. I had a little dispute, a little tiff with somebody who I felt really wronged by. And every time I got an email from that person, every time I got a text, every time I saw I had a call and we were in a professional relationship, it just irritated me. And I was like an accountant, and every time they called and it was like, yeah, I know the ledger here. I know all the invoices you haven't paid me. And every time I think of you, I put another mark in the ledger. And it was just eating me up inside. And I realized over time that we don't forgive someone for them. We forgive others for us, because forgiveness is not saying, oh, it doesn't matter, que sera, sera, but it's about saying, I release you from this because I'm not wanting the rest of my life to be bound to the anger and the resentment of what is happening right now that took place from an injury in the past. I ran across a statement that I quite like. It said, resentment is interest charged on a debt we refuse to release. When we can't release someone, when we can't offer forgiveness, that resentment is interest charged on a debt that we won't release. We forgive for others. And if you can't forgive for others, I will give you an Old Testament passage that you might like. The Old Testament says, be good to your enemies, because it is like pouring hot coals on their head. Now, Jesus is better than that, and Jesus says, love your enemies, forgive them, because it's the right thing to do, and it'll make you a better person. But if all you could do is, like, the hot coals sound pretty good too. The point in this is that what do you need to release today? What do you need to release this week so that some pain that you are carrying in your body, and every wound that we have, whether it's psychological or whatnot, holds in our body somewhere? Where are you holding on to a wound and a pain that you are carrying into the future? Harry Bosch said, I'm going to forgive my father for every second and every minute he lived apart from my mom and I, for every wrong he did to my mom and I, because I refuse to keep the pain of that wound going forward. Jesus says God's grace is unbelievable. The math, the economy of God doesn't work in human terms. God forgives a massive amount of debt for everything we kind of screw up along the way. And if God can do that for us, can we not do the little small things? Because when we do, it helps us heal. And it allows us to bridge relationships with people. And that's what the church does. That's what this church does. That's what we do as the body of Christ. So let's go into this week and let's forgive, let's release where we can, so that we don't carry the pain of old wounds into the future.